Hi, everybody. Checking to see if everything is working. So, as I mentioned yesterday, the Intel and Special Forces community has reached out to us and has shared some information with us. And of course, uh, so much is going on because we're being attacked. It always happens during the holidays, and the reason why is to silence us. We're absolutely over the target, um, and more is happening uh, um, in the intelligence community that is confirming that everything that we've been saying for over 5 years is right, that we've been right all along, that President Trump has been right all along when it comes to the U.S. Mexican southern border, I should say the southern border. And of course, uh, because of the confirmed U.S. Mexican organized criminal activity at the southern border, uh, and more. There is then retaliation. There is operations that smear. There are operations that try to silence. And so here we are. Here we are. And let's get started. Let's get started for today. Um, let's make sure. On day 1,975 days since Richard was forcibly removed from his barracks room. And he was under watch, and they absolutely admit that he was under watch. He was under whistleblower protection. This is what the false narrative that they gave us from the very beginning, that they try to smear Richard. They try to make him look like he was a troubled soldier. And the troubles came from them. The troubles were them trying to silence him, retaliate against him for being a whistleblower. And we knew, because of our relationship with our son, um, and who Richard is, the Distinguished Honor Graduate for basic training and AIT, for living most of his life in Europe, um, clipping out of college math and German at the age of 15. He got 12 college credits, boom, just like that in one day. Um, we were so happy that day. Um, and joining the military from Korea. Um, from Korea, can you believe it? Um, he was so excited and he wanted to be CID. He aspired to be CID. And we knew what they were telling us was a lie. Um, but you can't just call the CID and the command, who never notified us. Okay, this is something that people have to remember, or if you're new coming into this, have to know that they never notified us. They never gave us a call to let us know that something had happened to our son. We had to call them. We had to call them and say, "Hey, we haven't heard from our son. What's going on?" And then when we went there, um, it was a really big to do, right? It was over 15 different agencies, and it was international because we had the Fiscalia, we had the Mexican military as part of Task Force Find Richard Halliday, but there was never an op order given for Task Force Find Richard Halliday. The command came in their civilian clothing to make it totally unofficial. It was all just a dog and pony show to try to deceive us, to think that they were trying to do something, but they weren't. And we already, I stood in front of all of them and gave them evidence that God had given to us um, of the retaliation of foul play. Um, it was just it was really amazing because clearly they were in cover up mode. Clearly they were the criminals. And you can't just, just call out liar, 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 because you see what happens when you're up against my husband calls it the big green machine. Um, they will use and abuse their powers or positions and weaponize it against you, and you've seen that with President Trump, how they have used their powers and weaponized it against President Trump. Our evidence confirms that they did that to Richard, and they did that to us, to our family. We have mountains of evidence that they weaponized their positions. Tradoc, right? Where's Tradoc? Tradoc is Fort Huachuca. Fort Huachuca is Tradoc that they used against us. Um, and the asymmetric warfare officer. Do you remember that? I don't know if you've been following for a long time. You have Josh Lyons, the asymmetric warfare officer that we caught, that had been part of TRADOC, right? That was using his position to retaliate against us and smear us and everything. And this makes so much sense, this whole Fort Huachuca thing. And I'm going to get into Candace Owens' source. Okay. That is, but so much information is always coming in that I'm very bad, of course, because, I operate this evening live stream by myself. So I'm very bad about, sticking to the topic because information is coming in so fast with our son's case every day for 5.5 years. I don't know how. Well, I do know how I have the energy. I do know how I've gotten through this, and it's just by the grace of God, by the grace and the power of God, and angels surround. I mean, I've had so many people tell me that they have prayed for a hedge of angels to surround this family, this case, this investigation. And I can tell you that we have felt those prayers. We have evidence that those prayers actually created a hedge of angels around us. And so, yeah, it's just amazing all the information coming in. And so I want to give all of it as I get it. I want to give it all to you, to the people, because we are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we need to be about transparency. We need to be about clarity. We need to be about justice. And this is what's going to, well, we know this is what drove them in April of 2024 to declare Richard deceased. This is what drove them to, in January of 2025, January 24th, 2025, to declare Richard in the line of duty, murdered on Fort Bliss. This is a whole combination of evidence in the line of duty, and with the letters, as a hero, as doing his duty, as deserving the respect of the entire nation. And it goes on, right? It goes on and on. So we drove them to recognize Richard as a whistleblower, as really being the inside man for President Trump when it comes to the U.S. Mexican cartel organized crime using tunnels at the border, and targeting President Trump with the Walmart mass shooting, targeting Richard with the Walmart mass shooting, and we have it confirmed that it was Connell Wetton at the FBI there in El Paso that is the inside man for the cartel to do their dirty work right there in the FBI office in El Paso, and that he was the one that leaked Richard's name to the cartel, putting a target on Richard. And then when that happened, of course, there was full retaliation. November of 2019, and just full retaliation, and the abuse of power, um, the weaponization of positions, until ultimately he paid with his life, being forcibly removed from the barracks room, taken down to the basement room, which is the arms room, which is a soundproof room, and his life was taken. Our information is that he fought like hell. He bashed in one of the perpetrators' mouth. They needed um, emergency dental work, um, and but Richard's life was lost, and they took his body. They removed it from Fort Bliss. They trafficked. The overwhelming evidence that we have is that they dismembered him. They trafficked his body to Mexico for disposal. And there is huge possibility that because of this group being involved with mortuary operations, with the funeral homes, with Martha Mendez Aguilar, the she devil, the one that was um, taking these babies, targeting pregnant women, taking their babies, taking their organs, that there was organ harvesting going on here. And of course, with Richard's partial remains being dumped at Plenitude Crematorium that was just raided. Um, this year was just an amazing year because we got so many answers, and now we want our son's remains. So this is where we're at right now in the vicious negotiation for our son's remains, right? The vicious negotiation for our son's remains. And there's been several arrests. And, if we backtrack a little bit with what was going on in 2019, in 2017, El Chapo was extradited to the United States. And in 2019, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison here in the United States. That was in February of 2019. In July of 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested. Okay, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested in July of 2019. And the very next month, August 2019, was the Walmart mass shooting. Walmart, my husband says it's the Cielo Vista Walmart and Mall mass shooting, because gunfire was reported by Glendon Oakley Jr. on CNN, a totally reliable source, and so reliable that in April of 2020, he was also found not alive in the barracks room there in Fort Bliss. And our son in July, um, really, Richard's name was leaked because of the Walmart mass shooting, okay, because of the information that he had about the orchestration and the Fort Bliss ties to the Walmart mass shooting. This is very, very important for everybody to understand, because it shows that that was an operation. That was not just some lone shooter that randomly picked El Paso, that the motive was white supremacy. That is all fabricated. That was all not true. And then, of course, they connected that with President Trump because they wanted to hurt him. They wanted to hurt his reelection campaign. And so it became a political hit. And clearly, um, uh, they were wanting to do whatever it took to stop President Trump from being reelected in 2020. Whether you like President Trump or not, it doesn't matter. The truth is that the evidence shows that. The evidence confirms that they were engaged in election, um, the orchestration of something so terrible as a mass shooting, to orchestrate and to form and manufacture a narrative to politically harm the opponent, and the opponent was President Trump. And you saw that with Beto O'Rourke, who was running for president at the same time, running to, or not running, but going directly to the hospital where Ernest Christopher Grant was, who was um, a victim of the incident, but a total liar. And not, I didn't say he was a liar. The El Paso Police Department said he was a liar. The evidence says he's a liar, but Beto O'Rourke backed him up, and the media absolutely treated Ernest Christopher Grant as a superstar, as a media sweetheart. And of course, very political, because he started campaigning for gun control. Ernest Christopher Grant did. So this liar was campaigning for gun control, and he's been arrested. He had warrants out for his arrest at that time. He is a criminal. He has a total criminal record. So the evidence for the Walmart mass shooting being weaponized is enormous. It confirms it. There's no doubt after you look at the evidence. And Richard had reported its links to Fort Bliss, because remember that Glendon Oakley Jr. said that there were um, members all dressed in black, a group all dressed in black with M4s in the mall, and that gunshots were in the mall. So M4s are the military grade weapon that they use. So there's evidence that also connects, um, that Fort Bliss was connected to the Walmart mass shooting. Um, and all evidence is that they were really upset with Richard, and of course Glendon Oakley Jr. for connecting Fort Bliss with the Walmart mass shooting. And now we have all this new information coming out. The new information, and I'll try to put it all together, because it's so huge. Because for years now they've been saying that Richard, you know, really they just try to shadow ban, right? And try to say that Richard was troubled. They don't even like to admit that he was a whistleblower, even though he was in communication with Washington, D.C., was in communication with FBI Houston. He was in communication with the IG, with the CID, with Child Protective Services, with 911 multiple times with Child Protective Services. And that we have witness testimony that Richard was a whistleblower. And so, uh, it's just, they've tried to smear Richard so badly for the public not to care about our son, not to care about a U.S. Army soldier that was targeted by the U.S. Mexican organized criminal syndicate at the border, that has been fraudulently exploiting that border against the U.S. Taxpayer, right? The U.S. taxpayer, the U.S. people, um, and also migrants, all the children that were exploited and trafficked, and some no longer alive, many no longer alive. Also, we know by the Soroldi case, that there was exploitation of the migrants, um, you know, sexual exploitation of them. We know that. We know that there was arrests in 2025 that are still ongoing about insurance companies and all of this fraud at the border. Medical fraud at the border, which is so like, oh my gosh, because we know about the um, Martha Mendez Aguilar with the organ harvesting, and then to connect that with the insurances and the medical and all that, those arrests that are going on right now. Then, of course, we know about the hit on the cartel and their security, who was the in charge of the tunnels. We have on the tunnels have been unveiled. The Plenitude Crematorium, the narco crematorium dumping ground with over 400 bodies there, um, has been exposed, where they were given ground construction material in urns to families. And, so that means that all of that paperwork, all of those documents were all tampered with and fraudulent. We know all of this. And it goes on and on and on. The amount of fraud, the amount of scams using humanitarian aid, recycling bodies as unidentified migrants. We know about the PPP fraud that was going on, that they arrested at the very beginning of 2025. Millions of dollars of fraud with PPP. We know about the El Paso Walmart mass shooting victims funds, over $12 million fraudulently distributed. So there is so much fraud here. And we know that Martha Mendez Aguilar's family was working for Beto O'Rourke. We know that the owners of the narco crematorium live in El Paso. Rosa Maria Purchase, Arliano Caron, living in El Paso, many different businesses her family has, many different houses, one house right next to Beto O'Rourke. We know all of this information, and now we hear what's going on in Minnesota. We hear about the billions of dollars of fraud that's going on at these daycares that don't have any children, that are getting millions of dollars. They're licensed to have children, 99 children, 90 children, 80 children, 120 children, whatever, and there's no children there at all. And then the Medicare fraud that's going on there, the autism fraud going on. I mean, the list is huge. And so it's not isolated to just Minnesota. It's not isolated just to the Somali community. It is absolutely in El Paso. It is absolutely at the southern border. And now we have Candace Owens coming into this, right? Candace Owens and her source. And just amazing sources, because she was friends with Charlie Kirk. And anybody who has kept up with half, what did oh, I'm thinking about Rush Limbaugh, right? He always said, with half their brain tied behind their back or whatever. Uh, you know, Anybody that's keeping up, was not this huge follower of Candace Owens, but I absolutely knew who she was. I knew who Charlie Kirk was. I didn't, totally follow them, but I knew who they were because of my adult children following them, and them being such important influencers to our country and around the world, and absolutely around the world. And so, of course, I knew who they were. Um, I knew that. uh, there was, strife going on with different influencers and that. So it is very clear that Candace Owens was very good friends with Charlie Kirk. That is not disputed at all. And I know where I was when Charlie Kirk lost his life. I know where I was. I was in my daughter's van at the time when I looked at my phone, and I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. It was so obvious that Charlie Kirk, um, that knowing what we know about our son's case, knowing what we know about the Walmart mass shooting case, knowing what we know about UVU, that we know about this Mormon faction, that we know uh, the power of what Charlie Kirk was saying and doing in his life and his group, um, and knowing that the attempts on President Trump were also connected to this same group, this same group. And people would look at me like, "What?" And I'm like, it's hard to believe, but the whole Butler, the whole Florida, the the connections with Hawaii, the connections with this group, the connections with this Mormon faction, and then with Twigs, with uh, you know you have Tyler Robinson connected to Lance Twigs. Um, it just blew us away because we knew that there was a connection. We knew that there was a connection. But of course, our aim every day is to we are in the vicious negotiation for our son's remains. This is where we're at. This is what our focus is on. And so, um, you know, to try to figure out TPUSA, to try to figure out what happened to Charlie Kirk was a direction that we knew was connected to our son's case, but we did not know. Um, we knew that it would have to be investigated because don't forget the CID, the whole law enforcement and intelligence and the command told us that they could not help us unless we investigated our son's case for ourselves and brought them leads. Okay, so the reason why we even started investigating is because we were told to. We were told to. If we thought that there was foul play in our son's case, which we did, then we would have to investigate ourselves and bring them leads. Otherwise, they could not help us. That is what we were told. And that is documented. That is absolutely documented. And so that's how we got started on investigating our son's case. And it has just been an incredible, there's no better person to investigate than the family, because the family will, they have their whole heart and mind in this, right? And has it been hell? Absolutely hell. Should our taxpayer money have been used, through the FBI, through the ATF, through the marshals, through the sheriffs, through the police departments, through the CIA, the EPIC, the El Paso intelligence community, through the DOJs, through the AGs, through the media? Should, because a lot of the media is funded by taxpayer money, right? So should they have been investigating? Of course they should have, right? That's why they're getting all this money. Um, but that's not what happened. Okay, that's not what happened. They were covering up. They were covering up, and they were misleading us. They were weaponizing their powers to retaliate against us, to bully us, to intimidate us. Tradoc, Tradoc was doing that. And Tradoc is Fort Huachuca. Okay, is Fort Huachuca. That makes so much sense now because of the connections with General Michael Garrett that he has with Arizona. Okay, with Tradoc. That makes, oh my gosh, and the retaliation that we were getting, who was involved in the retaliation against us and the smear and all of the threats and everything. It makes so much sense that this was in connection with Tradoc. And so, the source for Candace Owens, and I really believe the major source that she has is because she was good friends with Charlie Kirk. And she's a woman of faith. And God is no buttercup. God is no buttercup. It, when people are doing the types of crimes that are going on at the southern border, God doesn't just sit still. He just doesn't allow it to happen. Okay? It we are in communion with God, so he's waiting for um his his army, his people that are faithful, that want justice. He's waiting for them to do, um, to be in communion, to fight for justice. It's that saying, you give a man a fish, they eat for a day. You show them how to fish, they eat for a lifetime. God wants us to fight for justice. He wants us to fight for justice. He's not going to give it to us on a silver platter. He says, I'm in communion with you. You are baptized. You have a duty to fight the evil, to fight the devil. You have to reject the devil, and you have to absolutely establish heaven on earth with me, justice on earth with me. And that's why our forefathers in this country clearly laid it out for us that we were a government of the people, by the people, for the people, under God, under God. So, uh, so I believe that her source is absolutely God, is absolutely God. And I'm sure she can tell us so many stories, just like I can tell you stories of how we figured out who Nadal Baim was, right? Who we got these names from, how we found out what Josh Lyons was doing, the trade on. He was our casualty affairs officer, right? He was our casualty officer, right? And he was TRADOC, and he was an asymmetric warfare tactician, and using that power against us as our casualty affairs officer, using it against us, right? Um, and how we connected him with those that are connected to Michael Garrett, the four-star general, and things that happened with the um, command sergeant major, things that are coming in now from the intel and special forces community. Uh, how we found out all about Dallas Hart, right? How everything. It's it's just a miracle after a miracle after a miracle. And when God is with you, against you. And so we are very appreciative to Candace Owens for having Mitch Snow on and interviewing him, because his story, not so much being at Fort Huachuca, not so much what he saw at Fort Huachuca, who he saw at Fort Huachuca. His story is compelling, right? And now we know that he was actually there. But there's more to it. 35 years ago, he confirmed that the Mexican US had organized crime using tunnels at the border, that the military doxed him to the Mexican cartel, that the military was working with the cartel and criminal trafficking using tunnels at the southern border. This is so important to our son's case because it corroborates everything, eh, all the things that our son was whistleblowing about, and and all the retaliation that we have faced and have told people what's been going on at the southern border. And it also corroborates President Trump, the election interference. It gives motive for why they would orchestrate this Walmart mass shooting, why there was what happened with Alexander Gerhard Hofmann, right? What happened with the Walmart mass shooting victims funds. Everything. This corroborates so much of the case. It puts it all together. And we're not just some family now that are just saying these things. Now it's being corroborated. There's absolutely weight and truth in our son's story now. And there was always because of the hard evidence. But now with this interview that Candace Owens did, and all of what she has found out through her source to corroborate. I mean, look, they're fighting over alibis right now. Why is that a fight? I know exactly where I was. I have proof of where I was the day before, the day of, everything with Charlie Kirk's, what happened to him. You can't forget something like that, and you can't have a hard time establishing an alibi when you're someone like these people, because these people have very deliberate schedules, right? So it's, they're not just sitting at home playing a Wii game or a Switch game or something, right? Or whatever. They have very deliberate schedules. These are people that are handling millions and millions of dollars with these big businesses, and then the contracts, military contracts, um, uh, all of the international dealings that they have for influencing the people, because we are a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And there should be clarity and transparency. But what they want is they want to control your minds. They want to control your minds so that they can deceive what you see, right? And they also want to interfere in the election processes, right? The election individuals, because they want to control the keys to justice. They want to control the keys to law enforcement. They want to appoint their people in these positions, like the county clerk, because county clerks, they can tamper with documents, right? They can tamper with death certificates. They can tamper. They want to control the medical examiner. We got a fake. They don't want to have the medical examiner being legitimate. There's an illegitimate medical examiner in El Paso, Mario Raskin Ortiz, because they can control him that way. That's why they want people in this country illegitimately. They want migrants to come in illegally, because then if they're illegitimate, if they're illegal, then they can control them. They can blackmail them. They can use them, just like Zaroldi was doing with the migrants, women that he was taking advantage of, and then bringing them right back to their captors. It's just so obvious. Everything is now um, uh, being clarified and transparent, and they don't like that. They don't like that the people are starting to get it, and it's. I think we're right over the target, and I think we're in. Um, it's going to be very interesting what happens, because when they're facing the light, they will gnash their teeth and they will flail their arms. They will try to retaliate, and that's what's happening with us. Of course, they want to silence us. So make sure that you can go to richardhalliday.com, that you can go to um, Truth for Trump, Richard Halliday, and Judge Roger Rodriguez, the whistleblower in our son's case, who's like so heroic, and they just tried to whitewash his whistleblower confirmation that Richard's case was being tampered with, that there was foul play. He identified the prime suspects, and they. Um, the commander didn't even notify us when this came in. Ted Cruz didn't even notify us when he got it on his desk, and so many more. They wanted to keep this from us, and they can't. They just can't. They can't. And they need to be all held accountable for what they did to our son, especially Connell Wetton for doxing our son to the cartel, putting a target on him that led to his death, and worse because of the desecration of his body. Um, and you say, what do you mean that's worse than life? Um, it's all horrible. It's all an atrocity. It's all they need to pay, and the death penalty needs to be on the table. They need to pay. That's clear. But desecration of the body, when we're made in the image of God, is desecration of God's creation. And that's sacrilege. And so, they're committing sacrilege with over 400 bodies that we know of, right? Um, God is no buttercup. And, I really, uh, who is stupid enough to mess with God like that? You know? It's just wow. Um, so it's all accountability's coming. Accountability's coming. And when you have someone with the reach and the influence that Candace Owens has, that just by the grace of God, with no intention, she didn't go on with the intention to interview Mitch Snow saying, oh, this is going to corroborate Richard Halliday's story. This is going to help the Richard Halliday family, a Gold Star family. That was not her intention, you see. But that's exactly what happened. This is all about God, and bringing this all together. And I'm just very grateful, very humbled, and very grateful for that. Um, and it's being amplified. She amplified it so much that the intelligence and the special forces community reached out. And I'm just very grateful for that, because it's amplifying Richard. It's amplifying Richard. And he is deserving of all the respect and honor from the American people for being an uncompromised soldier. And all the smears that are out there, that's exactly what they are. They're fabricated smears. We have debunked all of them. And we don't talk about it because what we need to talk about is that he is a hero. He's a distinguished honor graduate. And all of that will be very clear to everybody if it isn't already. So we are very proud of our son, and we want his body. We want his body. We know that they have his body, and we know that they abused his body, and we want it. We want his body. So this is where we're at, and I'm very grateful for Mitch Snow for having the courage to reveal what he knew, and Candace Owens and to vet him, um, with her team like that, which would have taken us a long time to do, but her team did it in a very short time. And all of those that are smearing her, they look foolish because they have no argument. Anybody that listens to her presentations know that all of the naysayers look foolish, look totally foolish, and that TPUSA looks foolish. And I can tell you this, it doesn't hurt my faith. It doesn't hurt my faith in what Charlie Kirk had accomplished in his life. It was so powerful that he was infiltrated, just like our government. Um, this is an infiltration of even fine Richard Halliday at the beginning. We were so infiltrated with bad players that try to get real close to you and cozy up to you. Even our CAO, remember Josh Lyons from Tradoc was an infiltrator. Out the command were infiltrators. The CID was infiltrated. The El Paso FBI infiltrated. Um, ATF, the sheriffs, the marshals, I mean, there was so many that were there, and clearly they were infiltrated and compromised. Um, it's the AG, the prosecutor's office, the judges, the medical examiner, So is this something that I can't believe that TPUSA was infiltrated by those that wanted to control that the work that Charlie Kirk had accomplished? No, it's very easy to believe because that's the playbook. That's the playbook. And it's very clear that something is very, very wrong there at TPUSA right now. And something was very wrong on the day that Charlie Kirk lost his life. So I just want to thank, and today, right before it's over with, is the day that we meditate, pray over the loss of holy innocents when Herod abused his illegitimate power. The story of Herod going after the babies to try to kill baby Jesus, the point is, yes, it's horrible that he killed those babies. Absolutely atrocious. But what I don't hear in a lot of the sermons is that Herod was illegitimate. He was not the rightful king. He was from Esau. He was leading the Israelites illegitimately, and he knew it. He knew that he didn't have the right to the throne, to the crown, that the real king was Jesus. That's what he knew. And that's why he tried to kill Jesus, because Jesus was the rightful leader. And this is what's going on in this case. In what's, you have illegitimate individuals that got to their position by lying and cheating and not signing their anti-bribe statement, by illegitimate appointments, by compromised Senate Arms Service, issuing stars to compromise individuals to be leaders in our military over our children, putting them in harm's way. These are all frauds. They're all frauds, just like Herod. Herod was a fraud, and frauds do very evil things, like take the life of innocents. Go to whatever extent possible to silence the legitimate king, to silence the legitimate president, the legitimate patriot, the legitimate whistleblower. And I think that is the lesson for today, on this day, the day of Holy Innocents. And I just thank everybody for sharing. And we love you, and we want our son's remains. So please share, and please support the justice for Charlie Kirk, justice for Richard Halliday, justice for Glendon Oakley Jr., justice for these heroes that did such great things in their life. And I would say support Mitch Snow, because as of what I know, he is being proven legitimate, a legitimate witness. Now, were those people there? I don't know. And they're going to work that all out. But our law enforcement and intelligence community need to be driven to do their duty, which is to confirm or give us the alibis of those individuals. And we need to have justice for Charlie Kirk and justice for our son, Richard Halliday, which is giving us his remains, and holding accountable those that participated in this. So thank you so much. Thank you, Laura, for coming on and the prayers. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you for your prayers. Madeline, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing. So God bless you, and I'll be back tomorrow. God